In this video, I'll explore making an interactive slideshow within Figma using components and component sets. I'd like the slideshow to play automatically, to just automatically progress from slide to slide, but also be interactive such that the user could choose what slide they're on or progress from one to the next. So we'll do both. I've been working on this demo for this Veg Out website, which theoretically would sell vegetarian food as a delivery service. And I wanted to feature some different types of sort of healthy looking food right here in this hero image and have that sort of cycle between different images that I might use. Let's plan for that to be a slideshow. And so I do want to know the dimensions that I'm working with. And that particular slide here is about 1280 by 400 in size. A lot of that disappears behind the header here, so I'll need to consider that the header has 115 in height, and that might help me place some of the interactive elements that I'll build as well. All right, so let's get started with this. What I'm going to do is zoom out a little bit, Control minus, and just create a new frame here. So I'll go over to my framing tool. I'm going to just draw out a frame. I'm going to define the size of that frame based on the size of the image that I had. So in this case, it was 1280, and the height here was 400. And so that space should fit perfectly. I'm going to go ahead and call this slide 1 as the name of it as well. And I'm going to drop a box in there, a rectangle that will house my actual images. I'm going to go ahead and drag a box in here that's also the same size, and that's going to house my images. Now that I've got that, I do want multiple slides, so I'm going to make a duplicate of this. By holding down the Alt or Option key, I can duplicate this slide and make 2 more. So that's going to be slide 2, and you'll notice that it automatically updated the name of the slide or the name of the frame to slide 1, slide 2, and slide 3 for me. Okay, now that I have those things, I want to drop some different images in them. And so I'll go into my Place Image option and choose to place images. And so I'm just going to use these horizontal or landscape images that I have, these 3, and place them into the document. I'll choose Open, and that will load them up, and I can just go ahead and click one at a time to fill each of these with imagery. If all I wanted was these to progress automatically one to the next without any interactivity, I could just wire them up right now. So we could explore that by going to the prototyping mode. And what we're going to do is add an interaction to progress from slide to slide automatically. And to do that, we'll simply click on the plus or click on the interaction plus, either one, and we could wire it one to the next. So I'm going to click on this plus and simply drag it over to the next slide, as you'll see. And what we want to do is not say that this is going to be on click, but rather it's going to progress after a delay. And so I could add in a value here. I want it to be 3 seconds or 3,000 milliseconds. So it's on each slide for about 3 seconds, which is kind of snappy. It's not super fast, but it's a little bit fast. Good for previewing. I might actually slow it down on a real site. But it's going to progress to slide 2, and instead of going there instantaneously, I'd like it to dissolve, have a little animation to go there. Or if I had changes, I could use Smart Animate if I was animating on the screen itself. And I'll have a dissolve here that I'm going to actually have take about a half second, 500 millisecond dissolve. And I could apply, in this case, an ease out on there or an ease in on there. Either one. See what I like better as we go through. All right, so that's slide 1 to slide 2. Then what I want to do is go from slide 2 to slide 3. So I could click on this plus, or again, you could start from clicking on the plus on the right properties here to add the interaction you want. And what I want to happen is not to have to click the frame. I want it to happen automatically, but I can do that after a delay. If you wanted it to go immediately, you could have virtually no delay, but what I really want is to have a 3,000 millisecond or 3-second delay here. And again, I want that to then navigate to the 3rd slide. I don't want it to be instantaneous. I want it to dissolve, and I wanted, in this case, the timing of my dissolve to be 500 milliseconds and the timing function to be ease out. From the third slide, I want it to return back to the last one, so I could either click the plus or the interaction. This time I'll use the plus, drag the arrow back, and it knows I want to navigate back to slide 1, but not on click. I want it again after a delay. I can put in my delay. If I put 3s for 3 seconds, it will translate that to milliseconds for me and 3000 milliseconds. And then it's remembering now the interaction here that I wanted it to dissolve at 500 milliseconds. Okay, so this particular flow should work if we were to take a look at it. I could click my presentation to take a quick peek at that, maybe not necessarily see it in the device frame, see it at 100% size. And what we're getting is just an automatic transition or slideshow that progresses on its own. So just based on time, and there's a bit of a dissolve animation that's happening. So that's great. What I could do if I wanted to sort of make this work is simply, let me go back to this demo. I've got a couple of them open here. So what I could simply do is take this entire set and turn that into a component set, and then that component set I could drop right into my slideshow. I don't want that yet because I actually want this to be interactive and not just progress on its own. And so I want to add some other elements to this. So I'm going to go back into the design of it, away from the prototype, and add a few other components to this particular design. So I'm going to select slide 1 and design from that particular screen, and I'd like to zoom in on that a little bit. I can hit Shift 2 to just zoom in directly to that particular slide, or I could also hit Shift 0 to go to 100% to see that just at its native scale. And what I'd like to do is have a couple interactive components, such as little arrow buttons that can progress one to the next, or maybe some slide indicators to suggest where we are within this. Those might be little dots or little bars or something like that. So I'm going to build those out. I'll start with the arrows, and so for that I'm going to go to my polygon tool, and I'll just draw out a rectangle here. Not a rectangle, a triangle. I'm going to rotate that triangle in this case, and I actually don't want it to be filled. I just really wanted it to have an arrow. So what I'll do with that is double click on it to enter the editing mode where I can get at the vector shapes. I'm going to go ahead and add a point right here into the middle and then drag that point to that center point, and we end up just getting these little lines that are there. I'll select and say that I'm done with that particular shape, except for the fact that I need to give it a stroke here. So I'm going to go ahead and add a stroke onto it. I wanted it to be a thicker stroke, maybe 8 pixels, and I want that to be white, so I'll choose white for that particular stroke. I wanted it to be a little bit fatter, so I'm just going to go ahead and scale it to be just a little bit fatter, and I do think I want the thickness of those lines to be just a little bigger, so maybe 10 in terms of the stroke lines that are there. Okay, so I've got this little arrow, and that's going to be an interactive element that I'll use on one side of this. Now, one thing that I want to think about here is the fact that I actually don't want to make the user go right just over and on top of just that arrow. I want them to be able to really just click anywhere on the right side of my slideshow to progress, that they don't have to be right on top of the arrow. And I don't want the arrows to be too intrusive in the space either. So in thinking about that, what I might do is add some, like a kind of hotspot area as well. And so I'm going to go to my rectangle here and just like draw out an area that will be kind of like the hit state or a hotspot area. And I do want my polygon on top of that. But this right here does not need to be visible, so I can turn it to transparent just by having 0 opacity. Nevertheless, I could make that entire area clickable. I can make that part of the component. So I just have to be kind of to the right side, more or less, to trigger this. And I do want this to have some rollover effect. So when I roll over this, I'd actually like it to turn to the bright white, but maybe start just a little bit faded out from there. So I'm going to keep these two pieces together. I'm going to select that rectangle and the polygon, and sometimes I like to do the selection from the layers themselves, especially if I can't see what's happening here. And you know, I could name these things. Sometimes I'll name my hotspot, like my invisible button, basically. And then the polygon here is kind of my arrow, if you will. So those things, I'm going to go ahead and select both of those and turn them into a component. I'll create a component out of that, which will be my reusable object, and that component can have variants to it. And so I could certainly pull the component off. Ultimately, the component itself, not the main parent master component, is not going to be the one in my actual design. That I can pull off and kind of work on somewhere else inside the design, and we'll just have it as an asset available. We'll use a child instance of that in my actual slideshow. It's called component one, and I might want to rename that. So I'm going to go to the name here and call it my like arrow button or something like that. And that arrow button, I want it to have a variant. So up here, I could go ahead and add a variant to that. So I click add variant, and it will make a second one underneath here. And really the second one is the one I wanted to be bright. The first one I wanted to have a little transparency on. So I'm going to go ahead and select down till I get that arrow, and I'm going to add some transparency to that stroke where maybe it's only about 20%, maybe 20% opaque. And so we're going to have this sort of switch from one to the other. I could add some effects on both of these. I was thinking that maybe it'd be nice to have a subtle drop shadow on these as well. So I might add a drop shadow effect to that. And I didn't want that to have any sort of direction to it, but I just wanted a little bit of subtle blur, maybe just 4 pixels on the outside, maybe 6. And I'm going to make this about 40%. We can't even really see what that blur is doing, but once we put it on top of some content, it will just give it just a little bit of depth and dimension and have it stand out just a little bit better. So those blur features that I've added here, I got to sort of remember what I've added. I'm going to do the same thing to the white version of that that's opaque. And so I'll add that drop shadow. I'll double check and make sure that I'm using the same parameters that I used last time. I didn't want that to necessarily change. Although I could animate this where the drop shadow gets a little bit bigger or a little more noticeable potentially as I move from one to the other. So maybe initially it's very light and then it gets a little bit darker, and maybe I bring it up to like 60% with a little larger spread. So in theory I could animate those things as I go from one to the next. Okay, I've got the 2 states of these buttons, and sometimes it's a good idea to name your states. And so right now I've got the current variant, and by default we'll have the name default, and the first variant I've added is now called variant 2. So if you don't like those names, you can override that. The variant 2 really is my sort of over state to this. I might call it over. And the other one I might simply call my normal state, or the up state of it, if you will, sometimes. So I might use like up and over as a couple names, but you can use whatever you want. I want this to be interactive, and so knowing that, I'm going to go to my prototyping mode, and I'm going to be able to progress from one version of this to a different version. So I'm going to click on this plus and simply drag down. That will trigger my interactive behavior window that's here. I didn't want it to be on click, but rather while I'm hovering over that, I want this to change to, and not necessarily navigate to a different frame, but simply change the property. And the property that it's going to change to is the over property. So because I dragged to it, it put that in automatically. How do I want it to animate? Well, in this case, I want it to do a smart animate, and so it would animate the shadow a little bit and the color, and I could choose how long that's going to take. 500 milliseconds feels like it's a little sluggish for this. I'm going to actually maybe go down to 300, so that's a little snappier on rollover. Sweet. I now have that interactive arrow button ready to go, and what I can do now is simply drop it into my actual slides. And so it's available in my assets. There it is. I'm going to drag it from there, drop it onto my slide, reposition it, and I can see that I can see some of that drop shadow that was there, and I certainly can go into the design mode here and align this to the right, make sure it's kind of sort of centered or aligned to the right and centered vertically, right? Get it in the right spot. I want to use that same arrow button on the other side as well, so I'm going to have a duplicate of it holding down the Alt or Option key. I'll drag it to the other side, and what I'll do then is rotate it. I'm going to just grab this, rotate it all the way around. If I hold down Shift, I'll go in 15-degree increments and make sure that I've got a 180-degree rotation on that particular arrow. And I want to make sure that that's aligned to the left and centered vertically on the screen. There we go. I've got that arrow in the correct location. And so what I could do is take a preview of that. I'm going to click on that slide, take a look at what that arrow looks like as we progress. And there you see them. And that's what they're going to look like on rollover. Of course, they disappear once I'm on other slides. And I am going to choose this at 100% just to see that. But here on both sides, we can see that they roll over to show the actual style of that. I will need to copy these into the other frames that are there, but there we go. And I don't have to be right on top of that. Because of that larger hotspot, you can see I could be underneath it. I just need to be on the right side in order to trigger the behavior of the rollover to allow the user to progress my slideshow. I'm going to come back to this. Now, I happen to know that I'm maybe centering those was probably the wrong location for them. And part of the reason for that is my original design. If we were to sort of shift over to that, I'm going to go ahead and pan over. Well, the original design had the image, but I have got my header and menu bar on top of that. And that menu bar, if I was to copy that and paste it into this frame, we see that it takes up quite a bit of the room, and now the position of these slides appears to be like they're in the wrong spot. The good news, though, is that if I edit my master component, the child instances will edit as well. And so what I want to do is actually come on here and go to the selection that I have and move it down. So I'm going to shift down, and I'm going to look at where that position is on the screen as I'm shifting that. And I also want to know kind of how far down I moved it. And then I'll let go right there. And so that one I've kind of moved down. I need to do the same thing with the other version of this. So I'm going to double click on that and see where that is. So one thing to pay attention to, for example, is the Y value. Here it's 196. And when I click on it here, it's 146. So I had arrowed it down 50 pixels. I'm going to do the same thing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, while holding down Shift. Then it went 10 at a time to go to 196 in position. So now these should be in better positions, except it does do a little bit of a weird thing with this one, is that it shifted the other way because I had rotated it. So when I rotate it back this way, we've got it in the right direction, but just rotating it didn't work in that case. The good news is that instead of rotating it, I could just simply flip it. I'm going to go to my menu here under Object, where I get a lot of my options. And one of those options is to flip horizontal. You can see that that is Shift H as well. So I'm going to go ahead and choose flip horizontal, and it will flip it the other direction. So instead of rotating it, I can flip it because the rotation put that arrow in the wrong spot. But now this is sitting kind of in a better spot. I might have to edit that again when I actually bring it over. I'm not sure that I actually put it exactly where I wanted it, but it's pretty darn close to the location I want. And I do want those interactive elements to be available in each of my slides. And so to do that, what I'm going to do is go ahead and select both of them, and I'll copy them and simply go to the other slides that are here, click on those slides and paste in those elements, and they'll automatically drop into the right locations. I'll do that over here as well, paste those in, and so now those arrows are available in each of the slides that I have. I don't actually want this menu bar in my slide. I just needed that as a frame of reference, so I'll go ahead and delete that. And we could take a look at my slideshow flow again here. And so one of the things I could do, go back into prototyping, and you could do a quick preview of that flow by either hitting Shift Spacebar or clicking on this little one to get a small preview of it. And there's the slideshow, and you'll notice that the arrows are working on both of these, both sides, and all I have to do is kind of be over there to make that work. So we can do always a quick preview as well, or you could do the full presentation, which will launch it potentially within your device frame. You can always turn that off or go to 100%. Sometimes it looks a little weird when it's scaled, and so I would often like to bring it to 100% if I'm able to see it that way. So there's my rollovers for my different elements, and that seems to be working. And coming back to my design here, I could wire those up so that they actually are interactive and go to the respective frames that I wanted them to go to. So we could explore that. And of course, I'd go into my prototyping mode for that, select the part that I want to wire up, and I could add an interaction to that, that if I was to click on that, I could send it to the next frame. Or I could go over this and simply drag and drop. And in this particular case, when I click on that arrow button, I want it to navigate to slide 2, and maybe I want that to dissolve into slide 2, or what I could do is have it slide. Like if I do slide in, I could choose the direction that it's sliding and make slide 2 feel like it's coming in from the left. And since I'm clicking on that arrow, maybe that makes sense that slide 2 would animate into that direction. So that first arrow would bring the first slide over. And let's say I clicked on this one and did the same thing. I'm going to add an interaction. I could do it from here, or I could click on the little plus. That's going to go back the other way, right? And so in this particular case, I want the slide in to go the other direction. And I want to navigate to slide 1 on click. And I'll go ahead and keep the same 300 millisecond time signature. So I really only have those two wired up to go back and forth, but we could test the functionality of that by going into our presentation mode and taking a look at what that looks like. I'm going to go ahead and go 100% size. And so on these first different slides, I can click to have that progress over and click on this one to have it go back the other way. And so I'm using the little slide in function as the interactivity. Now, of course, my slides are still animating on their own when they do that because they're wired up to progress automatically one to the next. So even though I've added this behavior, that really doesn't mean anything in terms of preventing those other things from moving. So if we actually wanted this to not necessarily continue to slide while we're progressing, we'll have to do this in a little bit different way. So I'll get to that, but we could wire those different things up. And really what I need to do, that was just a little test. I'd need to wire all of these, right? So this one right here is supposed to wire to go all the way to the third frame. So I could go over to there, make sure that my states are correct, that I'm going to navigate to the third frame. In this case, I wanted it to animate, if I'm clicking, let's see, I want it to animate in, I think, to the right, if I'm going that way. And, okay, so I've got both of those. This one is supposed to progress here, and I'm going to go to slide 3, and I wanted that one to animate in from the left. So I click here, and it's like coming in from the left. All right, and then I'm going to move over to these slides. This one is supposed to wire to go back to slide 1. I want that to come in from the right if I'm going back. And then that will navigate there. And this last one, when we wire it up, I'll just click on the interaction here, on click, it's going to navigate to slide 1. And I want that to actually slide, and it's going to slide let's see, to the right, I think, here, right? Or no, we want that one back to the left. I'm getting confused at what system I was using going back and forth, but I think I got this. Okay, let's go ahead and click OK, and we can take a look at having that all wired up now. So I like to test iteratively to make sure that my prototype continues to work along the way, that it didn't mess something up. And so now I should be able to click on each of these and have them all slide in the same direction that way. and click on these to go back in the same direction that way. Okay, so I did get the logic of that sliding working, and we've got an interactive slideshow that also progresses on its own automatically. Now, we can certainly add other features to this. A lot of times people will add like little indicators of where you are. So I might go ahead and add that to my slideshow. And so what I'm going to do is just draw some small bars, like a little bar that will work as an indicator. And so I'm going to go into my design mode, maybe just have that be about 80 pixels wide and maybe only 10 pixels high. And I could give it some kind of color or style as well. I think what I'll do is just simply keep it gray for now, turn it into a component. So it's going to be now a component, and that particular component, it's just being named rectangle, and it's not the greatest name for it. I'm going to call it indicator, and we're going to use it to indicator where we are in our slides. I did want it to have a variant, and that variant here is going to it's going to change to just a darker color. So the fill for the variant should be darker, and I'm not seeing that getting darker. So where's my color here? Let me zoom in on that. I might not have this sort of with the right thing here. So let's make sure I've got the right thing, and there we go. I'm now onto the right thing. I want that to get a little darker on the variant. So there we go. So the variant is just going to kind of darken up. And what we're going to really have is kind of two states to this. Or I could have maybe I have the original be the dark version, and the variant be the light version. I don't know, sort of either way. I think I want it that way though. So I'm going to bring this back to a lighter version as the variant, that's going to be sort of brighter, and then this one is going to be the darker version. So we'll have that one be a little bit darker. And what I might do is name these, and so I want to name these particular variants. So I'm going to click on a variant, and that one's the default, but in this case I'm going to name it the on state. That's what it's going to look like when it's on. And then over here I'm going to go ahead and name it off. So that's what it's going to look like when it's off. And then what we can do is use that indicator in our design. So I'm going to take that indicator, drag it into our design, and I wanted to have 3 of these inside the design. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit and see where they're going to go. So I'm going to start from the middle here and just center that into the frame. And I think I want it to be 10 pixels from the bottom. So I'll go ahead and bring it in 10 pixels from the bottom. And I wanted to have 3 of these. So I'm going to bring another one to the left here. And then I'm going to make a duplicate and have one on the right. And I want them maybe all to be about 10 pixels apart from one another. So I could adjust the spacing here, or I could put them in a sort of layout group to figure this out too. But I wanted to figure out kind of what the spacing might be. That's 8. Let's see, 1, 2 on that side, 10 pixels apart. All right. Now that I've got them on there, because I named them on and off, and we can see that if I go into my layers here, we can see that the indicators themselves are available. There's the child sort of indicators that are there, and the properties for those. Up here, you'll see that it says property 1 equals off, property 1 equals on. Well, because I named those on and off, these are kind of special in that you can just toggle the property. So if I have it on or I have it sort of off, it will change its state. So because this is the first slide, I'm going to have that one on, and then I can have these other ones be turned off. There we go. And so now that I have that, I'm going to select all 3 of these, copy those, go to my subsequent slides, and paste in those indicators, and they'll go in the right locations here. But I need to readjust which ones are on and off. This one's now off. This one is the center slide, so that one's on. And then what I'll do is paste in again to this last slide. paste, it will go in the right spot, but I do need to update the properties for each of these to be the correct state. So there we go. I've got them all sort of in the right locations. They're not interactive, but they're indicating kind of how many slides I have and which slide I'm on. So if we come back to our slides and we choose to present those now, our indicators should be present. And as we move from slide to slide, and I want this at 100%, we'll see that the indicator itself is changing. And I messed up on that last one in that I had two of them on. So I can see what slide I did that on, that very last slide. There's kind of two of them that are on. I forgot to turn that middle one off as we went, but we could see that the indicators are working. I'll come back to my design, fix the little problem I had. So shift spacebar to scroll over to that and make sure that this in one is also off on the third one so that we're appropriately indicating which slides we're on. Okay, so this is all well and good, but I did want this content to be a little bit more interactive. And what I'm thinking I'd like to do is that when I click on one of those indicators, I actually stop the slideshow on the slide that the user chose so that it doesn't automatically progress. Like if I click on the middle indicator, I go to slide 2, but then I don't keep automatically progressing. I figure if the user chose that, they wanted to look at that picture, and I want to respect that choice and not just scroll away from it. And so to do that, I'm going to have to kind of adjust this a little bit, and I'm going to move my components just kind of out of the way. I'm going to bring them up here. You can always reorganize things, put your components in other places or on other pages. But there's the components. And what I'd like to do now is make a copy of my slideshow. So I'm going to take all three of these slides and I'm going to duplicate them down below. And so it's going to update this with slide 4, 5, and 6. In the prototyping mode, I'm going to take a look at 4, 5, and 6 now, and I'm going to zoom in on those. And if I'm on slide 4, what I want to do is break the delay progression on it. So you see that there's after a delay, it's automatically going to progress because that's what slide 1 was doing to slide 2. So when I duplicated it, same thing's happening slide 4 to slide 5. I'm going to remove that delay, which is going to be the interaction that automatically progresses to the next slide. So if I'm on slide 4, I'm on slide 4. It's not going to go anywhere. I'm going to do the same thing here by clicking on slide 5, removing the delay that sends it to slide 6. And then lastly on slide 6, I'm going to go ahead and remove the delay that sends that one back to slide 4. Okay, so if we're on slides 4, 5, or 6, those are static slides. They're not going to progress one to the next scene. Now I just need to wire all of this up. And so in this case, what I'm going to do is go to my prototyping mode from the design mode if you're on there to the prototype. And what I want to do is take this little indicator and make it jump down to the correct slide. So if I'm here and I click that indicator, it's going to jump to this particular slide down below. And I could make that instantaneous rather than necessarily have an animation, but it doesn't, when I'm on that indicator, I might want to actually say on click that it will just sort of navigate to that slide as a dissolve, I think. And I'll just say dissolve to that particular slide. And then this one, I'm going to go ahead and dissolve to slide 5, which would also stop it. And then this one, this last one, need to get the right one here. So that one is going to go to slide 6. So each of these should wire to the correct slide that they're supposed to go to. And sometimes it's a little difficult to tell because I'm clicked on one wire, I can't see the other one, but this last one should, that one goes to slide 5, and this one should go to slide 6 on click. Okay, so that's working. And then what we can do is go to these other ones to do basically the same thing. Or, what I could also do is take these three that are here with those interactions in place, and I want to select all three. If I can hold down shift and get all three at once to have all three of those selected, which I didn't quite get. Let's make sure we got all three selected. There we go. What I could do is delete the ones from these other places and use those that are already wired up. So I could copy these and sort of paste them into these other locations. Now that would mean that I need to kind of get rid of them from other spots, but that's kind of the correct wiring. So what I could do is just sort of get rid of them from here and I'd copy them from this other one and paste them in there. And I accidentally also grabbed my image when I copied. So I'm going to undo that. Make sure I get the right things. Maybe I'll just go into the design mode here and take these three. Knowing what I've got here, now I can go back to prototype. I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste these into slide 2. And you see that they're wired up in the right locations. So I might have set that up ahead of time so that these were working, but I'm going to select these other ones, get rid of those, and then paste these down into the right locations. Of course, when I did that, there is a little bit of a weirdness in here, is that I already had the right positions of the indicators. So under the design mode, this one was supposed to be on, this one is supposed to be off, and this one is supposed to be off. So by pasting them over again, even though I was able to get the interaction, go to the right spot, I've now got the properties in the wrong spot. So this one's supposed to be off, this one is supposed to be on, but in the prototype, the wiring is still correct on those. And we can kind of see that those have taken us to these other frames. Now, because I've got duplicates down here as well, I need to wire these to the right spots. And so this one doesn't need to go anywhere in theory because it is on its correct frame, but this one should wire me to that frame. On click will navigate there, and this one is supposed to wire me over to my first slide. So it gets a little complex with all of these wiring, but you get the basic idea that we got to wire this whole thing up. And this one's supposed to go here, and then if I'm on this, I need to make sure that that slide, this second one wires to there, and the third one wires to there. Hey, all right, I think I got it all wired up. I'm going to come back here to flow number 1 and our very first slide. We'll go into the presentation mode now and test this theory out. So under this, I'm going to go ahead and go to actual size, take a look at my slideshow working. These buttons should still be working, except that when I let go, we're automatically progressing. Now that shouldn't be true with these indicators. These are wired up. So in this particular case, I'm going to go ahead and go to the middle slide. Once I've chosen that middle slide, it's switching down to slide 5 of the slides 4, 5, and 6, which does not automatically progress. And so now we're stuck on that slide. I could sort of use these indicators still to go to the other slides that we're stuck on, but you can see that we're not progressing anymore. These other buttons still work, but we're now on the sort of slideshow that's underneath that isn't progressing automatically. The only way now, if I wanted to go back to the auto slide, to have it automatically animating and going slide to slide, I need some kind of play button or something like that that would take me back to that other part of the slideshow. I'm not going to build that, but I would simply make another component or something that was a play button, and that could switch me from, if I was in any of these bottom slides, back up to the top slides. Now that this is working, the magic of all of this runs full circle by turning this whole thing into a component set. So I'm going to sort of move this, make sure that I grab everything, and I don't want to sort of grab stuff I don't want, but I'm going to go ahead and select all of this together with all of the wired up pieces that are there, And what we'll do is we'll go ahead and turn that into a component set. I'll say create component set. So this entire thing becomes one thing. It's naming it component one. I'm going to rename it to be my slideshow. And that's the component there, the master component that has all the interaction in it. Now what I could do is go back to my design right here where I've got this particular image, and I can go to my assets and I'll make sure to bring my slideshow onto the screen. I'll position it where it's supposed to go, and there it is, sort of on the right location. It's got the indicators and the buttons. And then in my layers, I need to drag that down to the right location. So it was pretty much down here on the bottom, just above that sort of rectangle. I don't need the rectangle that's underneath anymore. I could actually delete that one. I'll leave it there for now. Now that I've got that slideshow in there, it's a single component that has all the interactions that I wanted for the slideshow. I could test this out, take a look at what it looks like. I want it at 100% here. And there's my slides sort of running automatically. I still have my interactions where I can go back and forth, and I can click on the indicators that are here to go to the right places. And when I click, I might be stuck on those particular slides at that point with no more auto progression. So a bit of a long process, but worth it in the end to have a cool interactive slideshow that either progresses automatically or interactively. I hope you enjoy building your own component sets inside of Figma.